Welcome to the Vocation of the Business Leader podcast. I'm Greg Balster. Here, we explore how Catholic leaders let Christ and the teachings of the church he founded guide their work, integrating faith and business. Each episode offers inspiring stories to help you live an undivided life. Thanks for joining us. Let's meet our guest, Henry Kutarna, the Catholic CEO. Welcome, Henry.
Thanks very much, Greg. Happy to be here.
You have such an extensive resume. Could you kind of introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. You could probably break it down, Greg, into 3 or 4 different components of my life. I grew up in a business family, real estate investors and renovators of properties and that sort of thing. And I also did a stint in government one time. So in the Canadian provincial government system, I was a deputy minister of social services. I was a deputy minister of economic development. And so I did a little stint in government. Later, I started to do consulting work. And so we are investors. We are angel investors. And so I have a family investment pool, and we are in 25 technology deals. And so I do that. And then you could say the fourth part of my life is that we started a few years ago the Catholic CEO, which is a consultancy that helps Catholic people, start a business or grow a business and run it according to Catholic principles and still be successful in business. And so we do that. And I also do something with pastors of parishes. We call it Parish Management 101. It's a program of helping priests to become more effective in their administrative roles so that they can be freed up more to do the pastoral work and the sacramental prep and the council and all of that sort of thing. So that's kind of a breakdown of what I do.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I see on your website, you say you can be fully Catholic and successful in business. Why do you think so many Catholic business owners believe that they can't integrate their faith in their work?
This is a great question, Greg. I think what I'm finding and our team is finding is that some people have, I would call it a notion that's probably not really well founded, and that is that profit or making wealth is bad. Now, the purpose of forming a Catholic owned business where you govern yourself according to Catholic principles is not necessarily to create wealth. It's to create employment, perhaps successful employment for your own family, and it's a way to resist the culture. But what people would realize that given your talents that God has given you, if you're suitable for business, there's no reason that you can't run a good business according to Catholic principles. So you won't do what the secular culture wants you to do, in marketing or in various other things. So our thesis, you could say, is that you can be Catholic, fully Catholic, run your business according to Catholic principles, but also be successful by being extra good in your business analysis, in understanding, your product and your customers and that sort of a thing. So we think that you can do both because God-given talents allow us to work. There's a dignity to work. There's a dignity to owning a business because you're creating employment, you're creating tax revenue, you're creating income for people. And that is part of how we get our families to heaven, by providing gainful work for people.
And I heard you mention one time what's the difference between a Catholic-owned business and a Catholic business?
Yeah, that's a great one. So a Catholic-owned business would be owned by people that want to use Catholic principles in the course of their business. In other words, fairness and ethical behavior and non-exploitive marketing, that sort of a thing. No gouging, no cheating, that sort of a thing. So that's a Catholic-owned business. But a Catholic business could be, for example, somebody who makes Catholic products. People who make, let's say, rosaries or home altars or things that are particularly focused and targeted on a Catholic audience. And I call those, a Catholic business in the sense that the product or the service is Catholic in nature. That restricts the market a little bit just to the Catholic audience or to the wider Christian audience. The other business, a Catholic-owned business, would work in the culture, not be of it, but in it, and would do all sorts of things for all the customers that are going to come forward from every ethnic group or every religious background.
So, speaking of background, tell me about your faith journey. You're growing up,
Yeah,
and
sure. The I grew up in a traditional Catholic family that was faithful. I come from my both grandparents were Polish immigrants. One brother went to the United States and one brother went to Canada. And on my mother's side, my the grandparents were farmers, and on my father's side, they were property real estate investors and workers in renovating properties. There was a Polish parish in the city that we grew up in. And so many immigrants came and gravitated to that parish. And because the priest spoke the language and culturally was attuned to the people, you could say the parish was really close to our life. And so it influenced our life. And so, as a third generation now, a young person in my family at the time, I was raised in a traditional Catholic family. So there was regular mass, not just on Sunday, but daily mass. There were, family rosary every night. We went to the devotions, we went to benediction, we went to adoration, we went to 40 hours, and we were all members. My brother and I would serve mass. My sisters were all in the choir. My mother was the church organist. My dad was the chairman of it wasn't called the parish council in those days, but it was the sort of the building and grounds and finance committee. So the church was part of our life all the time. And that's really where I had the foundation of how the Catholic CEO would eventually form, where we lived according to Catholic principles. And in the business, both on the farming side and on the real estate apartment block side, there was always ethical behavior. And we were constantly trained in how to be fair and ethical and not cheat and do the right thing and that sort of thing. So the faith was really close to us. And really, all along, I've always had the faith. I could say there was a period of time, probably in my 20s, when I wasn't particularly paying attention, although I did continue to go to Mass on a regular basis. I didn't really miss Mass, but I would say that there was a time when I didn't practice the faith as strongly as I should have. Today, I'm blessed with children and grandchildren that are faithful Catholics, and myself, I'm of an age now. I'm at a stage of life, Greg, where I'm looking to the future. The old, neither the day nor the hour. So I'm constantly thinking about that moment when I will stand in front of our Lord, and so I'm really focusing on the faith in a very serious way these days.
yeah, any day could be our end day.
Any day,
So
any hour, any time.
you just have to be ready.
Yeah,
The question is, are you ready?
yeah,
Amen to
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
So, did you want to go into government work, or were you already in the business world and they wanted you to help out, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's almost the way it happened. I was in business. I'm an economist by training. I'd graduated from university, and I was already working in the family business as kind of a general administrator, general manager. And then, because the family business was based on a principle of, you should go out and get an experience, 1 or 2 years someplace else outside of the family. So you don't just only work inside the family business. You get to see what the other parts of the world are, how it works in the other outside of the family, you could say. So I was looking around for something, but then I discovered in the area of social services, there was a need for, at the time, welfare reform was the term that was used, and that was to strengthen the system and clean it up and do some reforms that would actually bring it to, I guess, a more effective way of targeting the support and the help more appropriately. And so, because I had a lot of experience in doing this in business, I was appointed as the Deputy Minister of Social Services, and I had worked in Treasury Board, which is the finance department, a little bit before that. But the bottom line is that they wanted somebody who was not a social work expert. I'm not a social worker. I'm an economist by training, but I came from the business world where efficiency and appropriate use of funds and things like that were very important. So I was able to, in working with the elected officials, I was not an elected person. I was the top public servant within the department, but the cabinet minister that was in charge was a man that I respected, and so we actually formed quite a harmonious team. But that's the story. It was like they needed someone who had a business background, who could understand budgeting. I could tell a tale out of school here, chronically budget troubles in that department. And so we cleaned that up. We sharpened up the budgetary practices. We didn't harm anybody in the client group, but we brought more efficient practices into the system. We brought in more effective training for our leaders so that they would become better managers of their own little unit. In those days, I had 28 regional offices scattered all over a province. Well, I had a $300 or $400 million budget in those days and 3,000 staff. So it was quite an empire to run in one sense, requiring a lot of focus and attention. But the bottom line was they wanted someone who was not a social worker by profession, but who brought business principles to it. And that's how I got that stint. And so some years later, I did leave that and went back into business, particularly into the consulting work. But it was quite an eye opener. I've done my public service, you could say. And, I've had some great experiences in understanding how that public sector works, because it's an important part of our economy, too. It's not, people make smart cracks about government workers, and it can be true in some instances. But I saw dedicated people trying to do a good job and try to solve almost impossible problems. So I had a good sense of the regulatory world as well, and how political decision making works. That's an important thing for a business person to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start the Catholic CEO, and what was the vision for that?
Well, we started that at the height of the pandemic. So somewhere in, I would say, December of 2020, January of 21, we decided to hold a summit, my team and I. So a few of us decided to hold this summit because people were approaching us, and they were just, you could sense what people were concerned about in those days. For example, young people were telling us that they were going to lose their jobs for conscience reasons, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to accept that. I don't want to go to that event on Saturday. I don't want to wave that flag. I don't want to wear that label. And so, what do I do? And so, we put a summit on where we had several hundred people who worked with us on 3 different panels. And from that, we discovered that there are many people that want to leave the corporate culture. They want to resist the culture, honestly, and they want to go and consider starting their own business. And so we knew that there was an audience there that needed us. And so we quickly got to work, and we created courses, we created offerings. We have a mentoring service, we have a Catholic Business Accelerator, we have a number of programs, online courses, we have a YouTube channel, we have all sorts of ways to help people to understand how to start a business, first of all, and if you have a business, how to run it according to Catholic principles and still be successful financially. See, many people think that if you're going to be a Catholic run business or according to Catholic principles, you're going to lose money. Not true. You're going to make money, and you're going to be much more adept at financial analysis so that you can pay your employees more like a living wage, for example, or more than the minimum that the law requires, that sort of thing. So that's when it started, really, during the pandemic. And then what's happened recently is that the demand for our services has grown because many people in a culture that, let us call it a woke culture, people want to avoid that. They want to resist that. And especially, I'm finding young people who are just starting out in life with a young family, they want perhaps to consider a family business, or they want to do a business where there's, a chance for them to be independent and do their own thing and do a craft or make a product or a service that people love and respect, but independently of the big corporate machine. A lot of people are leaving their corporate culture. They're coming to starting a business, and we have to help them with the transition because can't necessarily quit your job from the corporate world, and then start a business the next day. There's that transition period. And so I find that we're trying to help people a lot in that area. It came about really because of the need at the time of the pandemic to help people to make that switch from the corporate world and to become more independent and to resist the culture.
So the majority of your clients that come to you, what are they looking for? What's the bottom line that they're looking for?
The bottom line is, I would say people are looking for, I'll put it this way, they're looking for permission to take a crack at something, and they're not sure about it because it's in all of us, right? If we have an idea, let's say you want to become a coffee roaster, you think that's a great profession to go into, and this is a true story. I can tell you of a client that has done this. This person wanted to be a coffee roaster, but how do you do it, Henry? Would they say to me, how do you do it? What do you do? Do you need money? Where do you get the money? How do you find staff? Where do you get the local municipal permissions to do it? And so we found that that's the number one. You could say it's not procrastination, but it's a sort of a low level fear or concern about how you do this. So that's one presenting thing. A second issue that people really need is they want to know how to be successful financially. If I do this, can I actually make a pension plan for myself? If I do this, can I actually support my family? Can I produce the income? How do I know? And so then we teach how to do financial forecasting and how to do a good spreadsheet analysis so that you understand, what the business could do under various conditions and different scenarios and different options. So first of all, in summary, it's like permission to make the move and some knowledge about how. And then once you get into it, how do you run it successfully so that you make proper profit, revenue, income, sell a good product, keep your customers, keep them happy, and bring in a great team, and then still run it all according to Catholic principles of fairness and equity and justice and fair play.
Have you ever had a client that it didn't work out, that they just couldn't, for some reason, they were afraid of what they think is the blowback for being too Catholic?
Yes, I'm going to think of a couple of examples. One example that I could bring to you is a client who wanted to work with Catholic people to help them acquire land. So let's say for an organic farm or something like that. And this individual had the right idea, and the blowback that he experienced was that he really never was able to pull it off himself. He couldn't. There was I call it procrastination. The failure in that case was that, and we started working with him, but in the end, it became obvious within literally a few work sessions with this individual that it wasn't going to go anywhere because he himself, brilliant idea, good Catholic idea, you could say, but inability to get off, and get going with this and to do the work that had to be done. So that's one example. Another example is there was somebody who wanted to start a business that would create products for people. And by the way, we have a lot of successful clients who create Catholic products, but I'm thinking of one in particular who was narrowly limited in the kind of products that they could produce, but social media started to attack them. And this is normal for a lot of these types of businesses. And I guess there's a certain amount of, water off a duck's back, right? We just have to learn to live with it. But this individual was such a private individual that they could not actually take the level and the degree of kind of blowback and concern expressed in social media. And in some of these businesses, you have to have a social media presence. If you don't have a way of using, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., to drive traffic to your website on which you can do the e-commerce. And you're going to take all that garbage noise, let us call it. I'm being honest with you. Then you can't do it. So we've had a few people who have done that. We've also had people who realize that they don't have the ability to do it. Once they see and understand the path that it takes in business, Greg, there's a you take a risk. It's not all smooth sailing. You're going to have crises. You're going to be trying to make payroll next month because the sales haven't come in, or you're going to try to, you have a supply chain problem, or you have a production problem. Suddenly you had a bad batch of, whatever it is you're producing, and you're going to get a lot of feedback and noise about it. You maybe can't get a loan from the bank. Maybe you have a financial crisis. And so there's a lot of challenge in business, and some people are not cut out for that and they can't do it. They can't take that pressure, and it causes inordinate stress. So, I mean, there's another angle that often comes to play as well. We always suggest to those who want to come to us, make sure that you and your spouse are on the same page about a business, because some families, they need to live according to the paycheck is coming every month, that money's in the bank on the last day of the month so that we can buy the groceries and make our payments and so on. But sometimes in small business, the paychecks, the revenue doesn't come in, or you have to go and do an accounts receivable collections policy, or you're in the case of apartment block owners, I'm familiar with this. The rents don't all come in on the first of the month. They may come in on the 5th, the 10th, the 15th. And then so what do you do in the interim? Can you borrow money? Do you have a line of credit? Some people can't take that stress and pressure. And does that happen in business? Sure, it can happen, but it doesn't happen all the time, and it's not something that there are standard ways to overcome it. So, these are some of the challenges that people face.
So tell me about a success story.
Well, let's see, a success story. So I'll tell you a story of a young woman who has it's a practice, and I'll just call it, counseling. Let's just call it a family counseling practice. And the challenge that this individual faced was that hard to scale that business, right? You can only sell X number of hours per day at X dollars per hour, and that's it. And so how do you turn that business into a larger income for the needs of the family? As the family was growing, we need more income, but we don't really want to create a business where we're hiring a whole bunch of other counselors. It's going to be still a one person counseling shop. How do we scale it? How do we grow it? And the success that came about was through some really good hard work, and certainly prayer and going to adoration and doing novenas and things like that to seek God's will for it. This individual added services that were, you could say, repetitive income. So working on a book, working on courses that can be repetitively sold, and then you can boost your income, and you can still use your talent, but you're no longer selling your time for money, although that's still there, but you're also selling, the products that you make for money, and you spend the time one time to create the course or the book or the micro book, and then you put it on your website and you sell it. So a success story, that's one. I've also seen another one where people were able to grow their business just by good marketing principles. And so I'm thinking of somebody who, a Catholic business, in other words, they were making Catholic products, but they really sharpened up their marketing. They really learned how to segment their market properly. They learned how to do the analysis. They learned how to make the right offer, and they learned how to time their discounts and their, regular pricing, all that sort of thing. And that, in that case, we've seen that company grow in revenue. And I don't know if I wouldn't say they've doubled their revenue, but they've certainly added a percentage increase every year. And so it's exciting to see that, because, they can support their family better and they can keep their employees in a stable situation. So it's pretty cool.
In a lot healthier environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say to a Catholic professional that is working somewhere that doesn't have the authority to change the culture where they're working? so that they can live a undivided life.
Yeah, the undivided life. This is such an interesting and valuable concept that you have, Greg. The advice that I would have for somebody like that is to, first of all, establish the set of principles by which you're going to be governed. So, as an example, if you're in a corporate environment, let's say you're a smart, up and coming, young executive on your way up the system. What's my red line? What's my go no go point? Will I give lip service to some cultural phenomenon that's against the faith, or will I say no right away? So I always suggest to people who are in this situation, have a set of guiding principles and govern yourself by those, and pray for the grace and the strength and the courage to actually live by those principles. So that's one thing. A second thing I would say is, in that situation, have a backup plan. Know what you're going to do if it worst comes to worst. If you have to say no to something, you know that it probably means you're going to be fired, or at least you're going to be, plateaued in your career, and possibly you'll be attacked in other ways. I'll use the word attacked in other ways. People know what I mean, I think. And so I always suggest, have a backup plan. What is that plan? Maybe you have some savings that you're going to aggressively save up a pool of funds so that you at least have 3, 6, maybe even a year's worth of income saved up, so that if you have to leave that under negative circumstances, you would have some kind of income to keep your family going and stable. And part of that planning, that backup plan, is also have a backup plan. Well, does it mean you can go to another company? And so you should be looking at the marketplace. You should be keeping your network at work, so that you might be able to find another job. But let's say that that's not possible, because maybe that same cultural sort of problem I'm talking about extends to all the companies in your field, your chosen field. Well, then you maybe have to look at starting a business. And so what I tell people to do is to consider, if you think it's right, and if the timing looks like it has to be this way, you can go part-time. Sometimes you can go to your boss and you can ask for part-time work instead of full-time work. And if that's not possible, then you can, with careful thought and attention, I realize this isn't easy, but you can quit that, and then you can take on a part-time contract. And then you can spend some of your time working in your office job, your corporate job, but then you can be working on a side gig, or you can be starting a small business, or you can be doing a home-based business to get your feet wet and to get started. So all in all, I'd summarize it: have a backup plan, but have the backup plan first according to a set of principles. How far will I go with before I have to say, I'm not doing this because it's against my faith? And then secondly, what is the backup plan? Do I have some money so that I can live for 6 months or a year? Do I have the ability to go part-time or find another gig where I can start a side business and then still have some kind of income for the family? Those, Greg, are the things that help a person, I think, to live the undivided life. We can't, I'm sure you've said this many times, you can't serve the two masters. You have to serve one. And we know which one we have to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard the Catholic economy, excuse me. And I love that, the thought of that. What is your vision of the Catholic economy?
This is something that we really love to talk about and to promote. Our vision at the Catholic CEO of the Catholic economy is, first of all, starting at the parish level. Later, you can go to the deanery level or the diocesan level, or even, a multi-state or multi-province level. But starting in your own parish, the Catholic economy could look like this. Few things. One, if you need a plumber or an electrician, look that person up in your bulletin and hire from your parish first, or at least give that person a chance to bid on your job. If we started doing that as Catholics, we would be doing what some other ethnic groups and religious groups have said to me. My friends, I'll tell you, my Jewish friends always say to me, Henry, we've been doing this for centuries. You guys are just finally figuring this out. So, example number one, if you need a plumber or an electrician, go to your parish first. And at least if you're not sure, you don't know the quality of the work, at least give that person a chance to bid and price on your project. Number two, think about ways to buy together. So let's say we could think of anything. I don't know, if you live in a winter state, if you're in Minnesota or Montana, you need winter tires. Well, why don't 25 families get together and buy their winter tires all at one place at one time and maybe get a package price? You can do that. You could also sell together. I went to Clear Creek Abbey in Oklahoma a couple of years ago, and I gave a talk in front of about 75, maybe 100 people who were all the villagers that live around that abbey. And a whole bunch of them were software people working remotely, living, in a small acreage around the abbey. They deliberately chose to leave the city life and go live beside, so to speak, under the walls of an abbey, right? And why don't you sell together? So one of the things I talked about was create a model where you market together as such and such a software group. Here's a name, Abbey Software Group. It's a simplistic view of the things, but you could market together. You could put a brand together. You could create a website and all your individual specialties in software, but you could market and brand together. I'll go further. Why don't we advise each other as Catholics? Within the parish, there are some successful people in business who are experienced. They've been there, done that. And you're a 25-year-old and you want to start a business. Well, why don't we have panels in our parish where they advise? You get 3 or 4 or 5 people together, and once a month or 4 times a year, you hold a forum where you advise young people on how to start a business. Well, why can't we do that? Or even further, why can't we put some money together, a pool of capital? What if in a parish, I'm familiar with a parish in Houston where there's 5,000 families. Well, out of 5,000 families, that bulletin is loaded with business ads. The back of the bulletin, it's 2 pages. It's the back 2 pages of the bulletin, probably 100 different businesses. What if every business put together, I don't know, I'm making up a number, $100 each, and you had a pool of, let's say, $5,000 every year to give as grants to young people about to start a business? Or loans. Why can't we start a parish credit union? My father and my grandfather did this. They started a parish credit union so that Polish immigrants coming to the city from the old country who needed to buy a car, well, they couldn't go to the bank because they had no credit rating and the bank wouldn't lend them. But they could come to the credit union and borrow $500 on their own word. Their word is their bond. And then they would pay that loan back, and then they would buy a car and they could start living, according to the new world that they had come to. So these are ideas all the way from hire your plumber from your parish, all the way to putting some capital together. We could do all of that in our parishes. We could be creating the Catholic economy, and then we could grow to the diocesan level, and so on and so on. It's an exciting prospect, and there's no reason we can't do it. It doesn't mean we lessen our standards. It doesn't mean that we're less successful in business. It means we're smarter, actually, in business. And I'll throw in one more thing, Greg. We can eventually, if we do this well, we can change laws. We can change marketing practices by our standards being more exemplary, less exploitive. We can resist the culture. We can change laws and legislation. Eventually we could change the culture. And that's business is one way to do it. Yes, evangelization, prayer, yes, yes, yes. But so can we do it in Catholic business approaches. So anyway, those are some thoughts about that.
That's fantastic. I love those.
Yeah, we get excited about it. I'll tell you, you can see we love this idea.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me more about the Parish Management 101.
Yeah, yes. We discovered also in the past probably 5 years, even before pandemic, priests who are given parish assignments now increasingly under pressure. They have to be like a CEO. They have to know, act, and behave like a CEO. Why? Well, because they have a complex. They have a building, a big church, perhaps. They might have hundreds or thousands of families. There's collections, there's programs to run, there's professional staff, there's a number of volunteers, there's maybe a school, there's grounds and facilities, there might be a cemetery. There's all sorts of things. And who's in charge? Under canon law, the pastor is in charge, not the lay people. There might be a finance council, there might be, a parish council, a pastoral council, but the point is that the pastor's in charge, and the buck stops with him. But the thing is, he may not have had the training. He may not have come into the seminary with life experience as a CEO. Most of them don't, right? And inside the seminary, in the program, as you well know, there's no time. They do theology, they do philosophy, they do their pastoral year, and then they're ordained, and then they're put into perhaps as a parochial vicar or an assistant pastor, depending on how you use, what terminology you use. But soon they're going to be in charge. And so they need to have the skill set. So we've learned that pastors, newly ordained priests, we even work with deacons in some of the parishes where we teach them some of the business skills that are necessary so that they can spend more time on their role as priest. Sacraments, mass, spiritual direction, counseling, that sort of thing, being with families. If we teach them to be good administrators and more effective in that role, it doesn't mean we want them to become CEOs. We still want them to have their vocation, yes, but they can do it in less time. They can do it more efficiently and with greater confidence, which then means that the parish is better run. We have parishes, you know this, there are parishes that have thousands of dollars a month in revenue and millions of dollars worth of assets, or they have fundraising projects in the millions to build a new school or a new wing on the, or the Adoration Chapel or something like that. So Parish Management 101 is designed for this, and we have clients in Europe and in Australia, New Zealand, United States, and Canada. And they're all, I would say, they're excited about this, and we think it's pretty cool too because they can speak in a group setting, confidential, about the real problems they face, and then they go through our courses. We have, I'll give you a couple of quick topic examples: conflict resolution, project management, accounting 101 for priests, the fitness and emotional and health of the priest, the processes of administration, HR issues. How do you supervise people? How do you create the, even the safe environment rules under which all the parishes are run these days? How do you actually execute that? And how do you do it? How do you supervise volunteers? How do you hold volunteers accountable when they're not your staff? At the same time, they're under your control. So this is it's a wonderful project. We're finding that there's a lot of interest in Parish Management 101. And so we are constantly adding new features to it. And we're finding that there's more and more seminaries, a couple of abbeys we're working with, a couple of dioceses. And they're all interested in learning how to be better managers of their parish so that it can be freed up, to do the pastoral work.
So how long have you been doing the Parish Management 101?
I think we started, the first pilot I did was about 5 years ago, where we had a group of priests come together to test out. I think we had 3 or 4, I think I did 5 sessions that summer, and we tested out the concept, and we had an overwhelming response. So within the last 5 years, we really find that it's not, in a certain sense, it's not a hard sell. People realize and they understand that there can be growth in skills, or you can supplement the skills that a seminarian comes in with from life experience. But the thing is, they can then become more effective as in their administrative and operational role, thus freeing them up for the pastoral role.
So have you always been so bold in your faith, except for when you were in your
Well,
20s?
yeah, in my 20s, I was, I was not going to say victim, but I was secular in my orientation, and so and there was some, there wasn't the support after the council. I can honestly say that there was less support for the devotional Catholic life. There was. It's an obvious phenomenon that I've experienced. But now I realize there's 2 things that came to me. One is I saw how many families during the pandemic were pressured, and they had to choose between their faith and their job, their income and their faith. It's an impossible choice. And some of them couldn't make the choice. They had to stick with the job and they had to swallow their principles. But they're regretful about that, very regretting that they had to do that and that they did that. And so I'm finding that emboldened us because we said, we can help people to solve this thing. The other thing is, at some point, you realize in your life, and I'm at this stage of my life where I will stand before our Lord at some point, the day that I die, the moment that I die, I'll be there and I will have to account for my life. And so, did I use my talents and skills to further God's kingdom and evangelize the world? And so that's when you say bold, it's an interesting word because I guess I am being more bold these days, and I'm doing it because I want to, build God's kingdom on earth here as well. But I find that I'm it's not that I have nothing to prove, but I'm less afraid of the consequences at this stage of life. And if there is, I talk to my colleagues who are similar age and similar life experience, we all say the same thing. We say, had we done this 20, 30 years ago, imagine how much good we could have done. But now, okay, we didn't do it back then, but we're getting better at it. And so let us be more bold, and let us stand up and say that we can be Catholic in our businesses and run them well and be effective at them, but at the same time, not give up on our principles.
And that's what you're doing. You're being more intentional, and you're helping the younger generation to
Yeah,
be bold and to
yeah, yeah.
live their
Well,
faith.
and
Absolutely.
you talk about the younger generation. Part of this boldness is also the encouragement. In fact, I heard a sermon this Sunday about encouragement, encouraging words, and that's something that particularly the young people who are of a generation that has faced challenges that I didn't face when I was their age. And many times I find that our effectiveness at the Catholic CEO is just in the encouraging that we give. We say to people, you can do this. There is a way to do that. Don't worry. It's been done before, or here's a path for you to solve that complex problem that you're bringing forward. That alone brings reassurance and relief to people. So I find that even the encouraging part, let's call it the cheerleader part, that's there and it can be effective. And certainly the skill set and the teachings and the actual learning of how to do it, yes. But just the simple fact that you say to somebody, you can do this. I can tell you have the skills and you have the guts and the drive to do this.
Absolutely. Henry, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about?
Well, you're probably going to ask me where do we find us, and so we,
Yeah.
our website is thecatholicCEO.com, and if you go there, you'll find our courses and our offerings, and you'll find various downloads and things that we have. We have a YouTube channel, so I guess you can. I'm sure that's just you look under the Catholic CEO, and you'll find our YouTube channel, and you'll also find us on social media. And so that's the main place to find us. And if you look there, you can contact us. We are always willing to talk with you, with anyone about their business idea or their concerns about being a Catholic and running your business successfully. So we're happy to talk with people at any time.
And I'll put those links in Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. So
It's great. Thank you.
anyone can find those.
Thanks.
Of course. Henry, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. And I think we'll just close it out there. So
Very welcome, Greg. God bless you and your whole ministry.
thank you. Thank you for joining us today's episode of the Vocation Business Leader Podcast. We hope you found inspiration as we explore the powerful union of faith and business. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more faith-driven leaders. Until next time, may God bless you in your work. Goodbye.